Have you ever walked into an interview with your heart racing so fast that you could only think of one thing: how to answer so that they would believe you deserve it? Have you ever focused so much on the door in front of you that you forgot who was standing right beside you? Naomi Carter was the same. She was about to attend her 44th interview, wearing a borrowed blazer, standing in shoes lined with cereal box cardboard, and carrying a resume with 13 months treated as a gap. Because she was so nervous, she began practicing her answers out loud in the elevator. The man beside her said nothing. He did not look at his phone. When the elevator opened at the floor he intended to reach, he still stood still. Naomi thought he was just a stranger. Stay until the end of the story, because behind that 13-month gap is a truth that could change the way we look at people who seem to have failed. Let us know which city or country you are watching from in the comments. If this story touches you, a like will help it reach someone who needs to be reminded that their worth does not lie entirely on a piece of paper. And subscribe to the channel to catch new stories together every night, because that man's name was on the door of the room Naomi was about to walk into. Naomi Carter was talking to no one. She stood in the elevator of a 42-story building, practicing answers for an interview that had not yet begun. Her voice was low, clear, just enough to be heard above the sound of the motor pulling the metal box upward. Her two hands were hidden behind her back. Her fingertips pressed into her palms, not hard enough to leave a mark, only enough for her body to remember that it had to stand still while other parts of it wanted to turn back to the lobby and walk out. The man standing about 3 feet from her had gotten into the elevator from the ground floor right before the doors closed. He wore a thin gray sweater over a white shirt, dark pants, and carried a leather portfolio. His suit jacket and tie were left ready in his office on the 38th floor. His morning had begun with a short meeting at the coffee shop across the street, where the two of them had talked about a contract worth more than the total amount Naomi had ever earned in her entire working life. He pressed the button for the 30th floor. Naomi had pressed the button for the 38th floor. She noticed him the way one notices another shape in a space too narrow to pretend to be alone. She shifted half a step to the left, adjusted her bag strap, and looked at the red numbers above the door. Floor 12. Naomi started over from the question about time management. She said every minute of a single mother's day already had an owner. Part of it belonged to the first bus. Part was for taking Eli to school. Part was for Lucy, who usually took 7 minutes to choose between 2 nearly identical hair clips. Every hour Naomi went to work was also an hour she had to pay someone else to take care of the 2 children. She was not better at managing time than other people. She simply had no right to waste it. The man's thumb had stopped right beside his phone screen. He did not turn it on, nor did he put it away. The black screen reflected the strips of lights on the ceiling while Naomi kept talking to the empty space in front of her, as if there were a glass table there and 3 people were weighing her family's future. The charcoal-colored blazer was slightly loose at the shoulders. The right cuff had been stitched with dark blue thread, off from the color of the fabric if looked at closely enough. The neighbor who lent her the jacket only had 1 spool of thread still usable. The black shoes were carefully polished. The left heel was a little lower than the right heel. Inside was a piece of cardboard cut from a cereal box, covering the lining that had worn down to the hard layer. The man saw these things without needing to lower his head. The elevator passed the 20th floor. Naomi moved on to the question about her greatest weakness. She breathed in, short and even. My greatest weakness is that a resume can only record what has a receipt. As soon as the sentence left her mouth, Naomi stopped. This was an answer she had not yet decided whether to use in the actual room. Safe answers usually take a familiar shape: perfectionism, taking on too much work, difficulty saying no to responsibility. They are chosen because they sound like weaknesses but do not make the hiring manager uneasy. Naomi's answer was not that safe. She said there were 13 months on her resume that looked like nothing had happened. No title. No company she stayed at long enough to become a reference. No clean straight line connecting the job before to the job after. During those 13 months, she had entered invoices by the day, covered reception shifts, checked inventory at night, and answered phones for a clinic on mornings when she had childcare. She had worked continuously. It was only the paperwork that had not gone with her. The 30th floor lit up above the door. That was where the man intended to go. A quarterly review meeting was waiting in the conference room, along with charts he had reviewed the night before and decisions that were nearly already prepared. The door opened. He looked at the hallway leading to the meeting room but did not step out. Naomi did not notice. She was running her thumb along the blue stitching at her cuff, checking whether it would hold through the rest of the morning. The door closed. The man passed by the floor he had chosen. Naomi moved on to the final question. 5 years from now, where did she see herself? She did not talk about a promotion or an office with a window. She said she wanted to be at an address long enough that her son would no longer put his shoes under the bed before sleeping. She wanted her daughter to stick a drawing on the wall without ever having to ask when it would have to come down. She wanted to know where Lucy's yellow cup would sit on a Thursday morning, because things like that are only small to someone who has never lost them. Stable, she said. The word sounded like the name of a place she had been heading toward for too long, yet still was not certain she would recognize once she arrived. The elevator slowed at the 38th floor. Naomi adjusted her collar, pulled her bag strap higher, then stepped out. She walked toward the reception desk. The man waited 2 seconds before turning into the hallway reserved for the executive team. Naomi did not look back. She kept walking, carrying the borrowed blazer, the shoes lined with cardboard, and the notebook that had been with her through 43 interviews. None of them had begun on the 38th floor. It had all begun at 5:41 in the morning that day, when Eli stood on a plastic chair and reached his finger toward the test button of the smoke detector, but he didn't press it. Eli stood still, his index finger less than a knuckle's width from the test button. The small green light kept blinking steadily, reflecting in his eyes each time it lit up. Behind him, Lucy was still asleep on the mattress, pushed against the wall, one leg out from under the blanket, her hand gripping the corner of the pillow as if afraid it might be taken away while she wasn't looking. Naomi watched her son from where she lay on the sofa. She braced her arms and sat up very slowly. A sudden sound at that moment could startle Eli and make him press the button. The test alarm was not loud to other people. His body remembered it in a different way. The rented room had only one window, one folding table, the sofa sagging in the middle, and 2 mattresses placed in the corner that the landlord called the second sleeping area. He did not call it a bedroom because it had no door. Naomi did not argue about the term either. Places with an extra door were usually more expensive than places without one. Eli turned around when he heard his mother's feet touch the floor. "Mom, the light is still blinking." He did not ask whether that meant it was safe. He had learned that adults usually answered questions like that with words meant to make children less afraid, not necessarily with the truth. Naomi walked over, placed one hand on the back of the chair, and looked at the device together with him. The battery had been changed 11 days ago. She remembered because she had written the date on the back of the receipt, then tucked it into the small pocket of her bag. "It's working." Eli watched the light blink 2 more times before stepping down. He put the chair back in its place, then went to the end of the mattress. His sneakers sat neatly there, toes facing the door. A clean sock was tucked inside each one. The laces had been loosened just enough for him to slide his feet in without needing to sit down. Eli was 8. His clean clothes usually sat in a pile on the chair. His pencils rarely stayed in the case for more than a day. Library books had turned up under the sink, behind the sofa, and in the spoon drawer. Only the shoes were always in their place. Naomi turned away before he noticed she was watching. She took her phone out of its case, checked the balance, then set the phone face down on the table. $68 in the account, $20 folded into quarters, hidden behind her library card. Morning childcare cost $35. The bus fare there and back was $6. Lunch had been prepared the night before. 2 slices of bread with a layer of peanut butter spread so thin it was almost just a smell. Naomi did not add the numbers into a total. Some calculations were easier to bear when kept separate. The children's father had left their lives many years ago. That absence had not arrived through one big fight. It had arrived through calls that grew further apart, meetings that never happened, and money that was never sent. Every hour Naomi could not be with her children had to be paid for with money she earned herself. Tasha had hung the blazer on the door handle the night before. On the pocket was a folded note, the handwriting slanted because the woman had just finished a night care shift. "Give me back the jacket. Keep the job." Naomi set the note down beside her phone, spread a cloth over the table, then plugged in the old iron. The device needed 6 minutes to heat up enough. She knew because she had stood waiting for it in front of other rooms before, on mornings when the 2 children were still asleep, and she had to decide whether to iron first or boil water first. This morning she did both. While waiting for the iron, Naomi poured cereal into 2 plastic bowls. Lucy woke up when she heard the sound of the spoon hitting the bowl. She sat up, hair covering half her face, then looked around the room in a familiar order. The ceiling, the window, the door. Only then her mother. Eli pulled out a chair for his sister and set down her bowl. He checked the zipper of his backpack, added one more bottle of water to the outer pocket, then looked at his mother to make sure he was not taking more than what was needed. Naomi ironed the blazer on the cloth. The seam at the right cuff had come undone. She took Tasha's sewing box, chose the only spool of dark blue thread that was still long enough, and stitched it with small stitches. The thread color did not match. The seam held. The shoes sat under the table. The left insole had worn down so much that the sole of the foot touched the hard layer. Naomi cut a piece of cardboard from the cereal box, rounded the corners, then placed it inside. She tried standing in them. The cardboard felt slightly stiff. She kept it anyway. Lucy had eaten half her bowl when she took out a piece of paper from her backpack. On it was a yellow house with 2 doors, 6 windows, and many red arrows pointing outward. The sun was drawn in both top corners, as if one alone was not enough to guarantee the sky would be bright. Naomi smoothed the edge of the paper flat, then placed it beside Tasha's note. Lucy looked at the empty wall behind the sofa. She did not ask for tape. The black covered notebook sat in Naomi's bag. Its spine was held together with tape that had turned yellow. On the back cover was a bent key wrapped in a plastic bag, the metal darkened as if it had once been placed too close to something hotter than it was made to withstand. Naomi did not open the notebook. She rested her hand on the pocket for a few seconds, then called the 2 children to put on their coats. Eli checked the window. Lucy hugged the drawing to her chest. Naomi turned off the iron, unplugged it, and touched the outlet to make sure it was no longer hot. As the 3 of them stepped into the hallway, Eli turned back to look at the smoke detector one last time. Naomi locked the door, pulled on the handle once, then a second time, the way she had done ever since the last time she still believed she would come back to open it the next morning. That was 13 months ago. The apartment back then was on the 3rd floor of an old building. The hallway always smelled of diluted floor cleaner, and the light bulbs only shone fully during the first week after a new tenant moved in. The apartment was small, but it had a real bedroom for the 2 children, a door that could be closed and a wall empty enough for Lucy to stick her drawings on. That afternoon, she had used 4 pieces of tape to hang a blue house above the mattress. The house had only 1 door, no arrows. The sun sat in exactly 1 corner of the paper. Eli left his shoes beside the sofa, one tilted to the left, the other lay face down under the table. He did not check the window, did not look at the smoke detector, did not ask his mother whether they would still be sleeping there the next night. Those habits did not yet exist. Naomi folded the children's school clothes on the kitchen table. She put Lucy's shirt on top, Eli's pants underneath, and placed both pairs of socks on the same pile so that the next morning she would remember which pair belonged to whom. On the stove was a pot of noodles still enough for lunch. In the refrigerator was half a carton of milk, 3 eggs, and a box of strawberries that had begun to soften at the bottom. That life was not abundant. It was predictable. Naomi remembered the sound of the alarm before she remembered anything else. A sharp, repeating sound, cutting through the apartment before her body had even understood it was awake. She opened her eyes on the sofa. Lucy was crying in the bedroom. Eli stood in the middle of the hallway, wearing only 1 sock. After that, the memory no longer ran in a straight line. It existed as small fragments that refused to arrange themselves in order. Eli's bare feet on the cold tile floor. Lucy's hair caught in her jacket zipper as Naomi picked her up, a neighbor's hand holding the stairwell door, the smell of hot metal on the 2nd floor landing. Naomi did not remember whether she had locked the door or not. She remembered turning her head back once. In that moment, part of her still believed a person could not leave home without turning off the stove. Then she heard Lucy cough against her shoulder. She kept going down. Eli held onto the hem of his mother's shirt with one hand. His other arm hugged the empty lunchbox he had grabbed while running outside. No one had told him to bring it. It was perhaps simply the nearest thing. A child too young to know what he should save had saved the thing that went with him to school every day. Out on the street, Naomi wrapped her jacket around Lucy. Eli sat on the curb, looking at the dirty sock on one foot and the other foot with nothing on it. He did not cry. His fear was bigger than the words he knew. A relief worker handed Naomi a clipboard and a pen. She wrote her own name first, then Eli, then Lucy. The writing on the 3rd line slanted downward because her hand had begun to shake. They asked for the apartment number, phone number, whether anyone was hurt, and whether the mother and 2 children had anywhere to go for the night. Naomi could answer all of it except the last question. A man wearing gloves handed her a plastic bag holding a few items recovered near the door. A keychain. A coin. The apartment key, slightly bent in the body and darkened around the teeth. In a document folder hanging near the exit were also the 2 children's birth certificates and a cream-colored envelope from Ruth, Naomi's mother. Those were the rare pieces of paper that remained intact. Naomi held the key between 2 fingers. It still had weight. It still had the cuts made to fit one specific lock. Only the matching door was no longer a place she was allowed to return to. The U.S. Fire Administration estimates there were 343,000 fires in residential buildings in 2024. Cooking accounted for 46.7% of recorded causes, while electrical malfunction accounted for 7.7%. The numbers can sort hundreds of thousands of incidents into causes and rates. They do not have a column for the first night a child begins sleeping with his shoes under the bed. The mother and 2 children were taken to a shelter before midnight. The room had 4 single beds, 2 already occupied. Lucy fell asleep the moment her head touched the pillow, still wearing her mother's jacket. Naomi took the wet sock off Eli's foot, washed his foot in the small basin, then found a pair of donated shoes 2 sizes too big. Eli did not put them on right away. He placed one under the bed. The other was placed on top of it, toe facing the door. Then he lay down without taking off his jacket. Naomi sat by the plastic table, placed the bent key beside Ruth's envelope, then opened the paper listing 3 shelter addresses. Her finger stopped at the first line, where the address of a church on the south side of the city set aside 6 beds for families who had just lost their housing. Naomi read the address twice. She did not know which bus route passed there, nor how long they would be allowed to stay. The paper only had the name of the person in charge and a line saying check in before 9 in the morning. There was no space to note that Lucy would only sleep once the yellow cup was in sight. There was no space to explain that Eli needed to see the exit before taking off his jacket. They stayed there 11 days. Naomi's bed was placed right by the door. Eli had stood in the middle of the room for too long, his eyes moving from the window to the hallway, until she understood which position would let her son agree to lie down. During the day, Naomi called the landlord, the insurance company, the assistance program, and the phone numbers printed on the flyer beside the water dispenser. At night, she washed the 3 of their clothes in the sink, then hung them on the bed frame. On the 12th day, they moved to a former coworker's sofa. The apartment already held 4 people. Naomi and Lucy slept on the sofa. Eli lay on 2 folded blankets on the floor, his shoes placed by his head because the walkway was too narrow. They stayed there 19 days. After that came a motel room paid through an emergency assistance program. The room had a microwave but no stove. Naomi learned to cook noodles in a paper cup, steam vegetables in a Ziploc bag, and wash dishes in the bathtub without letting food slip down the drain. Lucy called it the house with the number because 214 was mounted on the door with 2 silver screws. Eli did not call it home. He began keeping keys in a tin that had once held mints. The key to the burned apartment sat at the bottom. Above it was the plastic card from the shelter, the spare key to an acquaintance's apartment, and the key card for room 214 that stopped working the afternoon they checked out. Every time they moved, Eli would ask if he could keep the key. He believed a door that had once opened for him might need to be opened again. Throwing away a key meant admitting that place had disappeared completely. Naomi did not correct that thinking. She found him a bigger box. Over 13 months, Naomi worked at 9 locations through 4 staffing agencies. 3 days entering invoices for a medical equipment warehouse. 2 weeks covering reception at a law office. 6 night shifts recounting inventory at a store about to close. 1 month answering phones for a clinic whose staff member had gone on early maternity leave. Those jobs did not connect to one another neatly. They overlapped during weeks when she had childcare and fell apart during weeks when Lucy had a fever or the assistance program changed its check-in hours. Some days Naomi left one shift at 4 in the afternoon, picked up her 2 children, took them to Tasha's, then started another shift at 6. On paper, that was 2 short-term positions. In her body, that was a 17-hour workday. Some places paid by check. Some used prepaid cards. One company sent pay stubs to her old address and never resent them. When Naomi asked for verification, the person who had signed the timesheets had since changed jobs. No one answered the old department's extension anymore. The paperwork did not say she had given up. The paperwork simply did not know where she had been. When she began looking for a new apartment, Naomi wrote the rent in the left column and the hours she could work in the right column. According to the fiscal year 2026 fair market rent published by the Federal Housing Agency for the San Francisco, Marin, and San Mateo area, a studio was set at $2,485 a month, a one-bedroom at $2,977, and a two-bedroom at $3,604. Naomi did not call that market data. She divided $3,604 by her hourly wage, then added childcare, transportation, and the deposit. She tried again with a one-bedroom, then a studio. Every calculation demanded more time than a month could give her. In the end, the three of them rented a room in a house with a shared kitchen. The landlord did not want the children touching the walls, so Lucy kept her drawings under the mattress. Eli put the tin of keys in his backpack and carried it to school every day. On job applications, those 13 months filled only a blank space between two lines. Naomi used to explain it in her first interviews. She told them about the fire, the shelter, and the day rate jobs. The person across from her would usually lower their voice. The pen would stop writing. The next question would come gentler. Then the interview would end with kindness and no callback. That kindness was real. It was not strong enough to overcome the risk flag. After her 22nd interview, Naomi walked into a drugstore, stood in front of the school supplies aisle, and bought the cheapest black-covered notebook. That night, once the two children were asleep, she placed the bent key beside the first page, then wrote the date, the company name, the position applied for, and the first question she could remember. Beside the answer, Naomi drew a dash. The answer was not wrong. It just did not lead her anywhere. She rewrote it 3 ways, the first shorter, the second more specific, the third stripped of the words she used to use to make herself sound more pleasant in other people's eyes. Nearly midnight, Naomi read all 3 versions aloud, very softly, so as not to wake the 2 children behind the curtain. The notebook began that way. In the weeks that followed, she went back through old emails, old calendars, and her memory to add in the 22 previous interviews. She recorded the date, the address, the interviewer's name if she still remembered it, the wait time in the reception area, and the first thing they said when they walked into the room. She recorded even things that seemed unrelated. Whether the candidate's chair was lower than the other chairs. Whether the person across from her had read the resume beforehand or only looked down at her name for the first time. Whether the glass of water was offered to drink or just placed there to make the room look hospitable. After enough failures, Naomi understood the cause sometimes lay in details too small to be named. Beside each answer, she used a check mark if the interviewer probed further in a good direction, a dash if they moved to the next question too quickly, 2 dashes if their eyes dropped to the 13-month gap and did not return to her face. Pages with many check marks had their top corner folded. Pages that needed revision had their bottom corner folded. Gradually, the top corners outnumbered the bottom corners, but not by enough yet to change the amount in the account or the number of keys Eli kept in the tin box. Naomi's interview skills improved. Her life had not yet. She did not call those times rejections. She called them data. It was not quite optimism. Optimism requires believing the next time will be different. Naomi did not always believe that. She only believed an answer could be more precise, a pause could be placed more correctly, and her hands could learn to lie still on her knees, even while the rest of her body wanted to curl up. By the 43rd interview, the notebook's spine had cracked in 2 places. Naomi taped clear tape around the cover. The adhesive had yellowed, sticking to small fibers inside her bag. The notebook smelled of hand lotion, mint, and old paper. A few pages bore a round watermark left by Lucy's cup. One corner of a page was colored blue because Eli had used its back to do math. On the back cover, Naomi had taped the bent key in a small plastic bag. It was not a lucky charm. The key reminded her that something could still keep its shape, yet no longer be recognized by the system around it. It still had its teeth, still had a head to hold, still had been made for a clear purpose. It was only the door that had disappeared. Behind the key was Ruth Carter's cream-colored envelope. Ruth had worked in a hotel laundry for 29 years. She started by sorting towels, then operated the press, and eventually oversaw the morning shift without ever receiving the matching title. On the payroll, her job barely changed. In practice, every new employee was sent to Ruth on their first day. She taught them how to spot a sheet still damp at the seam, how to listen for the bearing before a machine broke down, and how to fold a towel so the inner edge would not show. She spoke little. She only worked slow enough for the person beside her to see. Ruth measured time by washing machine cycles, the last bus, and the number of minutes needed to reheat dinner before Naomi went to bed. As a child, Naomi used to think her mother liked the smell of industrial soap because the scent always followed her home. Later, she understood some smells do not leave a person just because their shift has ended. Ruth passed away from heart disease 3 years before the interview on the 38th floor. There was no long final message. Only a hospital bag, a pair of soft-soled shoes, and an envelope found in the drawer beside the electric bill. Inside were 3 lines. Don't let a piece of paper say the years you lived were empty. No one clapping doesn't make your effort any lighter. When you walk into a room, carry your name with you. Hold your head up, and don't apologize for what you had to get through. They sounded like things Ruth used to say at the kitchen table, while folding uniforms or counting bus fare. This time she wrote them down, knowing there would be a day Naomi needed to hear them again when she was no longer there to say them. Naomi did not open the envelope before every interview. She did not need to. Those 3 lines lived in the way she wore the borrowed blazer, the way she recorded her 43rd failure, and the way she walked into a room without apologizing for how long it had taken her to get there. The morning Naomi stood in the elevator, the notebook sat in the bag against her hip. The bent key pressed into the back cover. Ruth's 3 lines lay beneath it. On the other side of the hallway, on the 38th floor, Adrian Vale took off his sweater, put on the assistant's vest he had prepared, then opened his desk drawer, where an old timesheet card lay face down under Adrian, flipped it over with 2 fingers. The card had yellowed at the edges. The paper around the punched hole had frayed after years of being clipped to the same board. On the employee name line, the typewriter had printed Evelyn Vale instead of Evelyn Vale. Only 1 letter was missing. The mistake did not delay the payroll, did not affect the hours, did not stop the building from being clean the next morning, but it still was not her name. Adrian's mother began cleaning offices when he was still too young to understand why she went to work, just as other people were coming home. During the day, Evelyn packed goods in a warehouse. At night, she mopped floors, changed trash bags, and pushed the metal cart through hallways with dimmed lights. She worked in the same building for 18 years. The name of the company that employed her changed. The color of the uniform changed. The person who signed the timesheets changed. Some years she was paid by check. Some years the money was deposited onto a payroll card that charged a fee for every withdrawal. The work stayed the same. She knew which door stuck when it was humid, which faucet had to be turned left before pulling down, and which vending machine tended to swallow the last coin of a night shift worker. She knew those rooms better than many people whose names were engraved on the doors. When a staffing agency went bankrupt, Evelyn's seniority record disappeared along with the timekeeping system. The new agency took her back as an employee who had never worked there a single day. She carried the card with her name misspelled for 7 years. Once Adrian asked why she did not ask to have it fixed. Evelyn looked at the card, then touched her fingertip to the line of text. They still pay the full hours. She took the card off, set it beside a plate of cold rice, and asked her son whether he had finished his homework. The answer did not sound sad. That was what made Adrian remember it for so long. Years later, he became the head of a company that built candidate evaluation systems. The company did not directly say who should be hired. It only provided scores, risk thresholds, and predictions presented in clean charts. That distinction used to reassure Adrian. He believed data did not know how to like or dislike a person. It took in inputs, found patterns, and produced probabilities. A continuous work history scored high. Multiple addresses within a few years was read as instability. A long gap on a resume triggered a warning. Adrian knew the system did not tell the whole of a person's life. He knew a person could work in the same place for 18 years, yet still be described by the paperwork as unable to hold a job. He knew his own mother would be screened out in the first round by the very model he built. He built it anyway. Speed was rewarded more than understanding. Clients wanted to process tens of thousands of resumes within a few hours. The board wanted accuracy that could fit on one slide. A number followed by a % sign usually sounded more like the truth than a life did. Success brought Adrian to an apartment set higher than most of the rooftops around it. Glass walls ran from floor to ceiling. The city lights sat below like dots that could be rearranged if viewed from far enough away. The living room had a cream-colored sofa that had never sagged. The dining table had room for 8, but most nights held only 1 plate. In the cabinet were bottles of wine gifted after major deals. Many remained sealed because no occasion felt private enough to open them, and no one was close enough to share them with. The apartment was very quiet. Adrian often left the television on even when he was not watching. The sound of people talking made the rooms feel less like something designed for display than for living. He had been married for 6 years. The marriage did not end in betrayal or a big fight. It ended through dinners repeatedly postponed, trips canceled, and the way Adrian always said, "almost done," though the work was never truly done. His ex-wife once said he could explain why 1,000 people left a company, but did not notice one person leaving his own home. He did not argue. After that, Adrian lived alone. He learned to call the solitude privacy because the words sounded like a choice. Every morning, he brewed coffee with the machine that remembered his preferred temperature, then stood before the glass wall watching the city grow bright. No one asked him how long he had slept. No children's shoes blocked the hallway. No drawing hung crooked on the wall. Everything was in its place. Only no one needed them there. Evelyn's card sat in the drawer for 11 years. Adrian did not display it in his office, did not mention it in speeches, and did not use his mother's story to make himself sound more compassionate. Every morning, as he picked up his watch, he saw the misspelled name. Then he closed the drawer. The morning Naomi came for her interview, Adrian left a short meeting near the building. He got into the elevator from the ground floor, pressed the button for the 30th floor, then intended to open the meeting documents on his phone. In front of him was a woman wearing a blazer loose at the shoulders, looking at the red numbers above the door and saying very softly that what she wanted in the next 5 years was not a title, but stability. Naomi said the word more slowly than the ones before it, as if it were heavier and needed to be set down carefully. She did not know Adrian was listening through the memory of a man who once came home to an apartment so large that the sound of keys set down on the table sounded like it belonged to someone else. She only knew the elevator door had just opened at the 30th floor. The man behind her did not step out. Naomi kept talking. She wanted a place to live long enough for Eli to stop putting his shoes under the bed. Wanted Lucy to stick a drawing on the wall without asking whether the tape would peel off clean. Wanted to be able to promise something about a Thursday without having to check her work schedule, her childcare payment, and whether her current address would still be hers by then. Adrian watched the numbers above the door pass 32, 34, then 36. He thought of the 8-seat table and the fact that no child had ever left a crayon behind on it. The comparison did not make him grateful. It made him feel ashamed in a way he could not yet name. The elevator stopped at the 38th floor. Naomi adjusted the cuff, stitched with blue thread, pulled her bag strap higher, then stepped out. Adrian waited 2 seconds before heading toward the executive hallway. In his office, he put on his suit jacket, tied his tie, and placed Evelyn's card back in the drawer. 10 minutes later, Naomi was shown into the interview room. The room had a rectangular glass table, 4 chairs, and a wall of windows looking down over the city. 3 chairs sat on one side. The candidate's chair was slightly lower, not enough to be called deliberate, but enough to make whoever sat there look up when facing the others. Helena Brooks was already seated. She opened Naomi's file, set her pen parallel to the edge of the page, and smiled with the kind of politeness honed over years of meeting people trying to hide trembling hands. Martin Shaw sat on the right. He stood to shake Naomi's hand, using both of his for a brief moment, then pulled out her chair. The gesture did not change the balance of power. It made sitting down feel a little less like a test. The third chair remained empty. Naomi set her bag by the leg of her chair. The notebook sat inside, the bent key pressed into the back cover. She did not take it out. Her 2 hands rested on her thighs beneath the table, where no one could see her fingertips gripping the fabric of her pants. Helena began with a question about a time Naomi had handled work with limited resources. Naomi described a medical office where the scheduling system had malfunctioned for 2 days, causing dozens of appointments to double book. She had split the list into small groups, called back based on urgency, and created a tracking sheet so the next person would not have to start from scratch. She did not say she had saved the whole department. She described what she had done. Helena took notes. Martin asked about handling multiple tasks at once. Naomi described a shift where she entered invoices, guided a replacement staff member, and cleared a backlog of calls at the same time. She said it was what needed doing so the next shift would not have to carry the unfinished part. Her answers had structure, not polished but clear. Naomi paused in the right places. She did not add an apology after she had already said enough. She did not make her experience sound bigger than it was. Helena turned to the second page. Her pen stopped. Naomi recognized the movement before she saw where it landed on the page. She had seen it in many rooms. A pause that lasted only a second or two, but enough to turn the whole conversation in a different direction. The 13-month gap. Helena drew a thin line beside that stretch of time with the tip of her pen. She had not asked yet, only marked it to come back to. Naomi kept her eyes on Helena's face. She did not tell the story of the old apartment, Eli's sock, or room 214. Those stories used to soften an interviewer for a few minutes, then disappear from her life. Kindness had never once paid the rent. Helena was about to ask the next question when the door opened. Adrian walked in wearing a dark suit, white shirt, tie neatly knotted. The man from the elevator had been placed into a different setting, giving every detail around him a new meaning. Naomi did not recognize the clothes. She recognized the eyes. The same eyes that had not looked down at a phone while she talked about 13 months with no receipts. The same eyes that had stayed when the door opened on the 30th floor. The same eyes now looking at her from the chair where authority needed no introduction. Recognition passed through Naomi before she could stop it. Every sentence she had practiced in the elevator suddenly became testimony. The things she thought she had said to empty air had been heard by someone who could close this door without needing to explain why. She thought she had lost her chance. Naomi still did not lower her head, did not apologize for having spoken to herself, did not correct a single word. The blazer was borrowed. The shoes were lined with cardboard. Even this morning's time had been bought with money she was not sure she would ever get back. The truth was the only thing in the room that belonged entirely to her. Adrian sat down. Helena slid the file toward him. Martin placed a copy beside the untouched glass of water. Adrian did not open the file. He set the stack of questions aside, then said that in the elevator, Naomi had used a word his system used every day, but he was not sure that system had ever understood it. He wanted her to tell him what stability truly meant. Naomi did not answer right away. She looked at Adrian, then at the file still closed in front of him. Helena was not taking notes. Martin had set his pen down but kept his fingertips resting on it, as if he did not yet know whether the interview had just paused or had only just truly begun. Stability means not having to be ready to leave. Naomi's voice did not shake. She had lived inside that answer too long to still need to search for the words. She said stability was knowing Lucy's yellow cup would sit on the same shelf the next morning. It was buying a large box of cereal without having to consider whether the three of them would still be there to finish it. It was filling in an address on a school form in pen. Helena looked down at the 13-month gap. Naomi saw it but kept going. Before the fire, Eli used to leave his shoes anywhere. One under the table, one behind the sofa. He used to spend 10 minutes every morning looking for them, and Naomi used to consider it a habit that needed fixing. After that night, she never had to remind him again. Eli always placed both shoes under the bed, laces already loosened, toes facing the door. He did it at the shelter, on the living room floor of an acquaintance, in room 214, and in the room they were currently renting. My son isn't really afraid of a house catching fire again. Naomi paused long enough to hear the air conditioner running above the ceiling. He's afraid he'll sleep too deeply to get out of it in time. Martin let go of his pen. A light object touched the surface of the paper. In the silent room, that sound carried the weight of someone setting down something he no longer wanted to pretend he hadn't seen. Naomi did not cry. She had told this story many times in her own head, but had almost never told it in full in a room with people evaluating her. In previous times, she had stopped after the two words, the fire. Those two words alone were enough to change the expression on the other person's face. Pity could warm a room. It did not necessarily open a door. Naomi explained she had not stopped working during those 13 months. She simply had not held one job long enough for the system to recognize it as continuous. She entered invoices by the day, answered phones, checked inventory at night, and took any shift that fit her childcare hours. Some weeks she worked in 3 places. Some weeks she did not work enough to receive one complete pay stub. On paper, those months were empty. In her body, they had never had a single empty day. Naomi's story was her own. But the part of a life that a resume cannot record is not rare at all. In 2025, the labor force participation rate for mothers with children under 18 in the United States was 73.9%. For mothers with children under 6, the rate was 68%. When the youngest child was between 6 and 17, the rate rose to 78.2%. Those figures counted both people working and people looking for work. They do not say who stood in a motel bathroom at 5 in the morning ironing an interview blouse on a towel. Do not say who carried a childcare schedule, fever medicine, bus tickets, and an emergency $20 bill in the same bag. Do not say a child learned to look for the exit before looking at the bed. Adrian's system used 3 main signals to assess stability: continuous work history, few address changes, a career path explainable by a straight line. Naomi met none of the 3. She had moved many times, held many short-term positions, had a gap longer than what the system considered safe. According to the model, she was a flight risk. The model did not know she had kept working, even when she had to change 3 bus routes. Did not know she had once stayed at an inventory shift until nearly dawn, because her replacement never showed up, then sat outside Eli's school waiting for the gate to open. It had no field for the ability to keep working while money, time, and housing were all shrinking at once. The system measured continuity. It did not measure endurance when everything kept being taken away. Adrian looked at the woman across from him, the blazer loose at the shoulders, the blue stitching at the cuff, her 2 hands resting still on her thighs. He thought of his mother, who had worked in the same building for 18 years yet was described by the paperwork as a string of short-term labor. Thought of the apartment where everything stayed in place without anyone having to fight to keep it there. Naomi finished without asking him to understand. She only said stability did not mean never having had to leave. Sometimes, it meant having been forced to leave too many times and still having enough left to build a place where someone else could live. Helena looked at the 2 dashes beside the gap. She did not erase them. Martin looked down at the page in front of him. Adrian still had not opened the file. Naomi stood up when the interview ended. She shook each person's hand, lifted her bag from beside the chair leg, then walked toward the door. Her hand rested on the handle for 1 second before pulling it down, while behind her, Helena brought her pen back to the page and drew 1 more short line beside the 13-month gap. Naomi did not see it. The door closed, leaving the room to return to 3 chairs, an untouched glass of water, and the file sitting in the middle of the glass table. Outside the window, the city continued an ordinary morning. Cars moved through the intersection. Sunlight slid across the rooftops. Nothing outside showed that a decision was being prepared above all that movement. Helena spoke first. She began with Naomi's competence, concrete examples, a clear way of organizing work, the ability to stay calm when resources were lacking. She noted Naomi never exaggerated her role and always described exactly what had been done, how, and with what result. Then she paused at the word however. She said the career gap still existed. Multiple addresses within a short time still existed. The string of temporary jobs had not met the stability threshold set for this position. Naomi's explanation provided context, but the process was not built to turn context into a score. Helena set her pen tip back down exactly where the 3 lines had been drawn. Competent, but high risk. The conclusion carried no malice. It was said in the voice of someone used to placing each file in the correct column, as if sorting created no consequence for the person being sorted. Martin looked at his own notes. He said Naomi was a strong candidate. He brought up her answer about the scheduling system, the inventory shift, and the way she handled tasks no one had directly assigned but that still had to get done. The 2 other candidates had more continuous resumes. Martin used to believe choosing the lowest risk person was the fairest approach. That morning, he looked at the chair Naomi had just left and realized that safety on paper was sometimes only favorable circumstance written in professional language. Adrian still had not opened the file. He placed both hands on the table, looked at the glass of water in front of the empty chair, then opened the small drawer beneath it. From inside, he took out the old timesheet card and set it down between the 3 of them. The name Evelyn sat on the faded paper. Helena looked at the card. Martin leaned forward. Adrian told them about his mother. He told them she had worked in the same building for 18 years across several staffing agencies. Told them her record turned into short, fragmented stints every time a contract changed hands. Told them her name had been misspelled for 7 years and that 1 morning of unpaid leave had cost more than a single letter. He did not turn Naomi into his mother. The 2 women had their own separate lives. Their circumstances could not be swapped just because paperwork had misread them both. The system had made the same kind of mistake with both of them. It looked at the breaks on paper and called that instability. It did not look at the person who kept returning to the same responsibility, even as the company name, the address, and the door kept changing. Adrian did not ask them to bypass the process. He asked that if endurance under scarce conditions was the quality the company still claimed to want, then how much more must a candidate endure before it was allowed to count as evidence? No one answered right away. Helena looked at the card, then at the 3 lines on the file. She did not erase them. She wrote in the right margin instead. Context does not erase risk. It changes the meaning of risk. Martin picked up his pen, wrote beneath Naomi's name, "Endurance already proven." The decision came after that. Unanimous, but not for the same reason. Adrian saw the competence the system had missed. Helena saw the limits of the very standard she applied. Martin finally chose instead of staying in the middle. Naomi did not know any of that. She sat on the bus home, by the window with no direct sun. The blazer was taken off and folded on her lap to avoid new creases. Every time the bus stopped, she placed a hand on her bag, checking by feel that the notebook was still inside. Eli and Lucy were sitting on the floor when she opened the door. Between them was a city built from cereal boxes, paper cups, and tape. Lucy placed the drawing of the house with 2 doors among the buildings but did not tape it down. Eli looked at his mother longer than usual. "How did it go?" Naomi folded the blazer once more, then draped it over the back of a chair. "I don't know." That was the truth. Dinner was noodles tossed with butter and frozen peas. Lucy ate all the peas first, leaving the noodles in a ring around the bowl. Eli put the 2 cups in the sink without needing to be told. Once the 2 children were asleep, Naomi opened the notebook to the next page. She wrote the date, the position, the 38th floor, and the names of the interviewers. Beside the answer about the work itself, she placed a check mark. Beside the 13-month gap, Naomi left it blank for a long time. In the end, she wrote that for the first time, she had told the whole truth without shrinking it to make someone else more comfortable. She did not revise her answer about stability. That answer belonged to Eli, Lucy, and the rooms where the 3 of them had once slept without daring to fully unpack. The next day, there was no call, nor the day after. By the evening of the 3rd day, Naomi sat at the table, mending the strap of Lucy's backpack. The needle had just passed through the first layer of fabric when the phone buzzed in her palm and Naomi stopped the needle mid-stitch. The incoming call was not in her contacts. The area code belonged to the city. For a few seconds, she just watched the screen light up, then go dark, as if not touching it could keep every possibility intact. The phone buzzed a second time. She picked up. Adrian's voice came after a brief pause. He introduced himself, though Naomi had already recognized it from the first word. That voice sounded different from the elevator. No more sound of the motor, no more red numbers above the door. Only the rented room, the sound of the refrigerator running, and the steady breathing of the 2 children behind the curtain. He said the panel had finished its decision. Naomi set the needle down on the table. Her body had learned long ago that important news had to be heard to the very last sentence before she allowed herself to react. Adrian said the position was hers. He explained that what he had heard in the elevator did not replace Naomi's competence. It had forced the panel to look properly at the competence that had been there from the start. How she worked, how she solved problems, and the endurance she sustained under difficult conditions were what the decision was actually based on. The decision had been unanimous. Naomi looked at the blazer folded on the chair. Beside it, the notebook lay open to the page of the 44th interview. She thanked him. Then she asked about the start date, the salary, insurance, working hours, the probation period, and the policy for when school was closed. She asked about the number of remote work days and how the company handled mornings when a child had a fever. Even a miracle in a mother's life still had to survive the arithmetic. Adrian answered each question. He showed no surprise. For the first time in years, he understood a job offer was not the destination. It was only a door, and the person standing outside needed to know whether the room behind it was safe enough to bring her children into. When the call ended, Naomi sat still. One hand held the phone. The other rested beside the needle. Neither hand shook. Behind the curtain, Eli turned over. The shoe beneath the mattress edge brushed lightly against the floor. Naomi raised a hand to cover her mouth. The tears came one at a time, quiet, like water spilling over the rim of a cup that had been kept full for too long. No one could have lived those 13 months in her place. No one had carried the 2 children down the stairs for her, found each place to sleep for her, or walked into 44 rooms for her. She cried because for the first time, what she had done was not being called a gap. The next morning, Naomi was still awake at 5:41. She still prepared the cereal, found the hair clip Lucy wanted, and checked her balance before buying bus tickets. The new job had not started yet. The paycheck had not come through yet. The rent was still due on its usual date. But when Eli asked whether they would be sleeping there that night, Naomi did not answer with the next day's schedule. Yes, just one word. Eli looked at his mother, then bent down to tie Lucy's shoelaces. He did not ask again. On her first day of work, Naomi arrived 17 minutes early. She wore Tasha's blazer. The stitching at the cuff replaced this time with a closer matching color. On her desk was a new nameplate, Naomi Carter. No letter missing, no misspelled surname. She rested a finger on the line of text for 1 second, then withdrew it. Adrian saw it from the end of the hallway but did not walk over. Some small moments shrink when witnessed too closely. Naomi learned the system faster than expected. She had lived for years inside the consequences of those flagged boxes. She recognized the gaps, the addresses read as unstable, and the short-term jobs sorted into risk. She began leaving beside some files a question the software had never known how to ask: what happened during this period? Adrian did not remove that question. 7 months later, with steady pay stubs, an employment verification letter, and money saved week by week, Naomi signed a lease for a small apartment further from downtown. The place was not fancy. The heater knocked at night. The cabinet door under the sink did not close all the way. The 2 children still shared one room, but the lease was in Naomi's name, and the landlord let them tape drawings to the wall. The first night, Eli placed his shoes under the bed as always. Naomi did not mention it. She kissed his forehead, then turned off the light. A week later, she walked past his room and saw the shoes out in the hallway. Naomi stopped. She did not call out to Eli, did not touch the shoes, just rested a hand lightly on the doorframe, watching her son sleep with both bare feet out from under the blanket. He had not entirely forgotten how to listen for the smoke detector. But that night, he had allowed himself to fall asleep before preparing to run. That same week, Lucy took the drawing of the house with 2 doors out of the document folder. She used 4 pieces of tape, pressing each corner onto the wall beside the dining table. Naomi stood behind her, holding one more piece in her hand. Need another one? Lucy shook her head. She believed 4 pieces were enough. One Monday morning, Naomi brought the notebook to the office. During her break, she left it open on her desk, then went down for coffee. Adrian walked by and saw Ruth's 3 lines. He did not touch the page. When Naomi came back, Adrian was standing by the window, and the notebook still lay in the same place. She closed it, put it in her bag, then walked toward the elevator with him. The door opened. This time, Naomi practiced no answer. She stepped in, reached her hand toward the button panel, and pressed the button for the ground floor. The door closed, carrying her down through floors that months earlier she had passed with both hands hidden behind her back and a voice just loud enough for herself to hear. Some lives look like a gap when viewed from a piece of paper. Some years have no title, no fixed address, or no one standing beside them to confirm how hard someone had tried. What was not recorded still happened. Naomi did not become worthy on the day she got the job. She had been worthy in the mornings, ironing a blouse on the kitchen table, in the nights counting bus fare, and in every time she held her 2 children's hands walking through a door not knowing how long she would be allowed to stay. The new job did not erase what her family had gone through. It gave them enough time for the slow habits of survival to become the habits of a home. A pair of shoes left outside the room, a drawing taped to the wall, a child sleeping without preparing to run. Sometimes, that is the true shape of healing. How do you feel about Naomi's story? Have you ever met someone judged by a gap on their resume, while behind that gap was an entire battle no one knew about? Share your feelings in the comments. You can also share your own story, or the story of a loved one, or a friend who once had to start over from the beginning. Perhaps that sharing will help someone understand they are not the only one trying to keep moving forward. Thank you for staying until the end of the story. See you in the next story.